Hi, class. As I was reviewing lecture 1.2, I realized that there was a few topics, or at least one particular topic, that I did not address. I just sort of moved right on by it, and I'd be remiss if I didn't go back and pick up the topic of Bacon's Rebellion, because this is a major turning point in the United States history of the colonial history, and you'll see why in just a moment. In the 1670s, one issue that has really been on the rise going all the way back to the very beginning of the colonial experience was that of indentured servants. Indentured servants were, and I think I've discussed this with you before, indentured servants were those that gave up everything, that risked everything to come to the New World to work off their cost of transportation, work off their food, work off their boarding, to basically to have a shot at property and land in the New World, in the English colonies. Usually, indentured servitude was 4 to 7 years, typically. Um, but, uh, but what had happened by the time that we see Bacon, Nathaniel Bacon, again, about 1675, I may be off in the year by a few. But what we begin to see is we've had so many indentured servants that have worked off their time, and they are now laying claim to this land that has been given to them through the headright system that had been established in these earlier, particularly these earlier Chesapeake joint stock company type of colonies. The headright system means that if I am a landowner, I want to bring over some folks to work, I'm actually awarded a certain amount of land because there's no guarantee that this indentured servant is going to survive to the end of his indenture or her indenture. Both men and women were indentured servants. But by the time we get to this particular event in history, and we're talking about Virginia specifically, the number of indentured servants that are freed from their indenture, they've worked off their time, are moving farther west. And as they move west, they are going to begin to come into conflict with the Native American peoples that have been pushed. I mean, quite frankly, they've been pushed to the mountains. They've been displaced, and the farther west we go, the more conflict you're going to have, because again, it just means more pushing, quite frankly. And so out on the frontier, you're going to see a number of raids. You're going to see a number of attacks, and those attacks are going to go both ways. Well, Nathaniel Bacon was an aristocrat. He had some money. He had some connections. In fact, he was a cousin of the governor of the colony, and that would be Governor Berkeley, I believe it was at the time. They were cousins, although from what I understand, they really didn't like each other. Bacon was a little bit too much in connection with the sort of the common folks of the back country. But and as such, those folks living in the western part of the colony are going to reach out to the government in Jamestown. Um, we need help. We need assistance. We need you to send the militia. We need you to call up the militia. We need you to do something to stop these attacks and raids on the frontier and these frontier settlements. And they approach Bacon and say, "Hey, will you sort of be our voice?" And Bacon is going to carry these concerns to the governor. The governor is going to dismiss them because really it's not his concern. He's governing sort of the city, the urban area around Jamestown, these large tobacco plantations that have risen up. And it sort of has the idea, well, you live on the frontier, you take care of it yourself. Well, when Bacon goes back and lets those that are affected by this sort of know, you're going to see what we call Bacon's Rebellion, and they're going to march on Jamestown. In fact, they're going to burn Jamestown down. Uh, Bacon is sort of the face of this. Now, Bacon dies before it's over. He drinks some of the water. He's going to get dysentery, which was a horrible way to die. But he does not survive to the end of the rebellion. Others are going to sort of scatter after Bacon dies. Um, but this is one of the first times we really sort of see the common folk rise up against the authority figures within the colonies. You might even say it's sort of a forecast of revolution itself. We're going to see something similar in around 1870 at the Battle of Alamance in North Carolina when the regulators rise up because they feel like they are sort of being abused or at least not being seen to by Governor Tryon of North Carolina. So again, this is a common theme. It's a common sort of story that goes through. Now, another thing I want to mention, and this is probably the most important thing immediately to the discussion in this particular lecture, is we're still having those that are riding the boat over from England. We still have those that are coming over as indentured servants. We still have those that are being promised land in the back country if they survive their indenture. Because again, you're not going to come over here with no promise of an opportunity. But when Bacon's Rebellion happens, you're going to have those in authority that begin to ask the question, how do we keep this from happening again? Well, one problem is the fact that this is a temporary servitude. You keep having to replace the indentured servants. Now, by 1670, we've seen a court case which is going to involve a former indentured servant whose origins are African by the name of Anthony Johnson. And Anthony Johnson is going to acquire land, and he therefore will begin to acquire indentured servants. And some of the indentured servants he acquires will be African as well. I think hopefully I mentioned in the earlier lesson that the first folks from Africa off the boat in 1619 in Virginia were actually indentured servants, really no different than anybody else, with the possible exception of they didn't have the choice to leave Africa, while many of them that left England did. But they're still treated like indentured servants. Their time is temporary. Well, this court case is going to be Anthony Johnson, who is going to charge one Anthony Casser, one of his indentured servants, of basically trying to break the deal, break the indenture. And the courts of Virginia is going to rule the punishment would be lifetime servitude. And so we could argue this is the beginning of slavery. Slavery has started to sort of take hold by the time and I think the Casser Johnson case was around 1645, 1650. So again, it's kind of an interesting story there. So we're starting to see slavery, African-based, lifetime inheritable slavery, started beginning to work into the background. And after Bacon's Rebellion, we start to see the shift more in that direction and away from the continued plan, which had been indentured servitude. So again, this is one of those turning points in history that that I needed to address a little bit. Going back through the lesson, as I said, for some reason I skipped right over it. I got sort of tied up in the formation of North Carolina and Pennsylvania, and for some reason my brain just sort of skipped right over the topic. So again, hopefully this has been helpful. Sort of insert this right into your notes. And again, as always, reach out to me with any questions or concerns. You guys take care. Bye-bye.